Good evening from Wolfville and Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, where fall is well underway, as is the new academic year. So for those of you missing Wolfville, I'm happy to tell you that it's buzzing with life and excitement, lots of new faces and plenty of returning faces. So it's an exciting time to be in Mi'kmaq and in Wolfville. My name is Oonagh Proudfoot. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Affairs in the Office of External Relations at Acadia. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening, and I'm joined by three panelists, all of whom are alum: Christine E. Hart, class of 1970, Payton Wood, class of 2018, and Katie Mowat, class of 2021. Who are here to share with us their paths in becoming lawyers and detail the strategies and efforts, hopefully, that led to their success. It's an opportunity for folks online to get to know our three panelists and certainly ask questions. We've had questions pre-submitted, which is exciting, so we'll cover off those if there aren't any that come up organically during our discussion. So please, if you have questions, you can raise your virtual hand. You can turn on your camera and raise your actual hand if you like. You can also write your question in the chat if you'd rather do it that way. So introductions of our panelists. Christine Hart is the president of Accord, Hart and Associates, Inc., AHA, and has 45 years of experience in dispute resolution as a mediator, facilitator, negotiator, adjudicator, and arbitrator. She successfully led Canada's first court-connected mediation project, and later established a comprehensive conflict management practice, first as a partner of KPMG and later as founder of AHA. Her work includes coaching executives, designing complaint processes, and mediating various disputes. Christine has served on numerous not-for-profit boards, including the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health and the General Insurance Ombuds Service. She has held significant governance roles and was a member of the Ontario Cabinet as Minister of Culture and Communications. Christine has been a lawyer since 1975, specializing in commercial, environmental, and transportation litigation, before becoming a leader in alternative dispute resolution in the early 1990s. Christine holds multiple designations in law and graduated as an accredited corporate director from the University of Toronto. She co-authored Bypass Court, a dispute resolution handbook, and has taught mediation for the National Judicial Institute, training new appointed judges. Further bio information is available online as well. Thank you, Christine, for joining us. Next up, we have Payton Wood, class of 2018. Payton is originally from Brantford, Ontario. She is proud to be the second generation in her family to graduate from Acadia, receiving her Bachelor of Business Administration in 2018. During her time at Acadia, Payton was involved with Acadia's Sensory Motor Instructional Leadership Experience, the SMILE program, and had the opportunity to establish the Acadia Students' Union Food Cupboard, the first student-run emergency foods resource on Acadia's campus. After graduating from Acadia, Payton attended the Schulich School of Law at Dalhousie University, where she received her Juris Doctor in 2021. Deciding to put down permanent roots in Nova Scotia, she now works as a lawyer at the law firm of McGuinness Cooper in Halifax. Payton primarily practices in real property, assisting clients with residential and commercial transactions, commercial financing, and condominium matters. Payton is a member of the Nova Scotia Barristers Society and the Real Estate Lawyers Association of Nova Scotia. She currently sits on the board of directors for the Acadia Alumni Association as the chair of the governance committee and a member of the executive committee. She's also a volunteer ski instructor with Canadian Adaptive Snow Sports. In her free time, Payton can be found running, cycling, and forever cheering for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yay, Payton. Thank you for joining us. And Katie Mowat, class of 2021. Katie Mowat has a lifelong passion for politics, starting as a legislative page in grade 7. And volunteering in numerous elections at all government levels. Active in high school, she served on several committees, organized initiatives like the Student Mayoralty Vote, and was a co-music director for the jazz band. She has been a leader in the jazz and music community in Toronto, performing in prominent venues, playing the saxophone. She has written songs for various notable artists, with some nominated for Grammy Awards and being played on The Tonight Show. Katie graduated from Acadia University with a degree in politics, focusing on international relations, comparative politics, and international security, and led initiatives connecting the university with the Glooscap First Nation. She then completed an MSc in Global Crime, Justice and Security at the University of Edinburgh, examining the impacts of COVID-19 had on migrant workers' security in Canada for her thesis. Afterwards, she pursued an LLM in international human rights law, immersing herself in a wide range of legal areas. Her thesis focused on Canada's use of public interest immunity claims in terrorism prosecutions and provided best practice recommendations for safeguarding the right to a fair trial. Now a law student at the University of York in England, Katie aims to specialize in international law and human rights, viewing her diverse background as a unique strength for her future career. And thank you, Katie, for joining us. First thing I'm going to say is just wow. So for those of you online with us this evening, you have a rather broad spectrum of experience from these three panelists, representing a wide variety of legal aspects. So I encourage you, please, to submit your questions, turn your camera on, ask questions, and so forth. But before we get to sort of more flexible and informal Q&A, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to take a couple of moments to share with us a little bit about how they got to where they are. So I've just read you a bio, and there's lots of information of very interesting things that all three are bringing to the table and to the conversation. But I'd like to offer them an opportunity to just speak a little bit more about how they ended up where they are, whatever that looks like. So why don't we start with you, Christine?
Oh dear. I went to Acadia at 16, and at the encouragement of my mother. Her sister had gone there, and her two sisters had gone there. In fact, her sister Elizabeth Lambie was on the board of governors for many years. So I wasn't really thinking about career. It was a long time ago. It was in the 60s. Women, I saw the opportunities as nurse, secretary, teacher, and I didn't think I'd be very good at any of them. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But in my fourth year, I took as an elective a law course offered by a Kentville lawyer. I wish I could remember his name because he changed my life. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I applied for law school, didn't tell my family. My dad was a judge. You know, my family, I knew a lot about law, but women didn't go into law then. It was very unusual. And anyway, I got in and went to Dal for a year, looked around, no women lawyers, really none, you know. And so I thought maybe I should leave town. And I did. I went to Toronto, transferred to U of T, graduated from U of T. I've been in Toronto ever since. I am a member of the Nova Scotia Bar, retired member. Actually, my dad called myself and my brother at the same time to the bar, Nova Scotia, several years later. My resume looks like I can't hold a job, and that's probably true. Part of it is that I was female. In those days, people went to a law firm and you stayed there forever. That was it, unless you were female. Then you were lucky to get a job to start with, but then they thought all the firms in Toronto should have a woman 1 year, so they did. But none of us got hired back. You know, that's just the way it was. All of us have those stories, and I won't bore you with them. But it gave me a different slant on practicing law. I was a law clerk to the Chief Justice. I did the downtown Toronto law firm, partner, all that stuff. But I got to a stage where I looked around and thought, 10 years later, is this all there is? And turns out it was, you know, bigger money and that you're fighting over and all that stuff. I was a litigator. So I became interested in politics. I didn't know anything about politics, even though my dad had been an MLA in Nova Scotia. I didn't really know anything about it, except that we were taught to work in every election. He didn't care who the candidate was. In fact, my family covered the whole waterfront. My cousin was Alexa McDonough, who led the New Democrats. And my grandfather was such a strong Tory, he threatened not to come to my mother's wedding because she was marrying a Grit. So there is a history with politics. I have been very fortunate in my career in opportunities that have come up. You work for them, but because there were so few women, we were noticed. It had a good news, bad news kind of side. And so I I was involved in Ontario politics. I was a minister. That was all. I met amazing people, worked with them. And afterwards, I thought I don't want to go back to litigation. So I got myself trained as a mediator at the Harvard School. And I love that. And I did that for many years, all aspects, as Oonagh was mentioning. I was involved in governance of many things, the Toronto Airport, many boards. My favorite is CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. I've been involved with mental health issues for my entire career. Family, every family, mine is no different, have those issues to deal with. And what else can I say? I sort of retired when Katie came. Katie's my daughter. Not really. I was doing mediations, part-time, but I was 51 when she came. And I thought, why would I give her to a nanny when I've waited this long to have, my baby? She was 11 months. So after that, I had different opportunities, and those were mostly governance. And I have practiced law throughout. So I've been a lawyer for more than 50 years, although now retired. It has been an interesting run, ups and downs, as in everything. And I'll probably just leave it there.
So again, just wow. I have questions already. We're going to get through each person's intro before we start digging into questions. But I do appreciate that you said, with reference to, the 60s, the late 60s, and being the only woman, and you're not going to bore us with the stories. Well, guess what? You're not going to get off that easily. We're going to come back to some of those stories. And also, I'm just going to say that the bios, of course, did not point out that Katie is your daughter. So it's out now, folks. So two of our panelists are family, but lots of family connections there, and very interesting. So love to dig in on some of that as well. So thank you, Christine. Payton, over to you. And I see we've already had a guest appearance from your cat. So
yes, I apologize. Polly Pocket is
Please
her name,
don't.
and she will be walking across the camera whenever she gets the chance. She's currently asleep on my lap, so hopefully she stays that way. But she does like to make a guest appearance, and that is Christine, a very difficult person to follow. You've been practicing for 50 years. I've been practicing for 3. But walk you through a little bit about how I got there. So like Oonagh said, I grew up in Ontario, needed to get out of Ontario, as many of us do. So I came east and ended up at Acadia, which was the most wonderful 4 years of my life. After Acadia, I didn't really, when I went to Acadia, when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to do law, but of course, you're trying to be practical about what you do for your undergrad. So I did a business degree, which was wonderful. I had FC Manning School of Business. I had a really great experience, and I did a marketing degree. And then I decided that I wanted to go to law school. And that's when I looked at Ontario, I looked out east, and I settled into Dalhousie. And I went into law school thinking I wanted to be in the courts. I wanted to litigate. I wanted to be in a courtroom doing advocacy work. So after law school, when I was applying to firms, that's still what I had in my mind. I ended up staying in Halifax at a really great firm. And as it has, and for many of you who might not be aware, in order to be a practicing lawyer, you have to do a year of articling, it is called. So it's kind of like an internship. It's your on-the-job experience before you're called to the bar. And during that year, I realized I never wanted to step into a courtroom ever again. So I ended up doing, as Oonagh said, real property law, and I love it. I've really found my niche. I love what I do. I love the files I get to work on. And it's funny how went into law thinking I wanted to do one thing, and I ended up in something that could not be more different, but somehow just as fulfilling. And yeah, so I've been doing that for about 3 years now, and so far so good.
Thank you for that, Payton. And I think a lot of times when people think about law, they think about courtrooms, right? And Suits. Like, who hasn't watched Suits? And so looking forward to more sharing of what that looks like and what your work looks like, all of you. And also to say that I'm sitting here thinking, so my niece is at UNB Law now, and she's actually doing a study abroad term in Maynooth in Ireland. So glad we're recording this, because I will be sending her the link afterwards. And she'll be, because I don't know which way she's going to go yet. So we'll see. So thank you, Payton. Katie, over to you.
So, as my mom has already kind of alluded to, that we have a lot of politics within our family, and it was definitely something that was kind of instilled in me at a very young age. So, as you mentioned, my first kind of real glimpse into kind of generally politics and just like the process of all of it was at the Ontario legislature as a page when I was in grade 7. And then from there, essentially, um, I just essentially continued on with that path of just loving the process and understanding the different tensions within the process and all the, you know, various things that make up politics. So, anyways, long story short, from there, I went to Acadia after high school. I went because I was looking for a smaller school. Grew up in Toronto, so I was very used to the big city and, kind of all the opportunities that were around at that point there. But I was willing to kind of change the scene that I was in and then go to Wolfville. I did apply elsewhere, but because I had family roots, like my mother and my grandparents, other family members, I chose Acadia. So I initially entered into Acadia as a double major in neuroscience and politics, thinking that I was actually going to be, a neuroscience studying the connection between music and people with Alzheimer's. So that was my ambition at the time. Clearly, that has shifted to what I'm in now. But I took my first kind of few science courses and I realized math and science was not my thing. So I dropped the neuroscience slash psychology aspect of my majoring and just kept with politics. So I enjoyed my years at Acadia in the politics department, and essentially, I think the period and or moment in my degree that kind of changed the way I was approaching my trajectory of career as well as just general interest in a specific area of academia was when I took international security course taught by Dr. Mutlu. And I was one of the youngest in that class, and he allowed me to take it because he kind of already knew that I had a keen interest in that area of politics. And so I took that. And then since then, I kind of just kind of prioritized focusing most of my other courses that I took at Acadia in politics with the the lens of international security. So then after I graduated Acadia, I went to the University of Edinburgh for a master's in global crime, justice, and security. And that was not necessarily the plan in terms of location. I wasn't immediately thinking I was going to be studying abroad. But when I was doing research to figure out what I wanted to do for my master's, I didn't really see many options offered by universities in Canada for international security that wasn't specifically like cybersecurity. I'm more focused and interested in the physical security, the human security, the kind of different conflicts that are happening around the world and how we can try to look at ways in which we can create, better security for all different parts of the world. So anyways, so I went to Edinburgh, did that master's, was introduced to just so many different realms of just international security related things. It was politics courses as well as law courses. So at that stage, I took a couple international security related courses and realized that I really loved the law side, not just the politics side. So then after that, I figured why not apply for law school? So I did apply to law school the first time around, actually, in Canada. Unfortunately, I did not actually get any acceptances at Canadian law schools just because my LSAT score wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And because Canada kind of approaches their process for law school in a very kind of narrow-minded way, in my perspective, being if you don't hit the number, you're not even going to be looking at the rest of the application of the candidate. And so I clearly was kind of dismissed immediately. And then that left me in a position where I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? So I essentially chose to do things slightly backwards. So I did my master's in law in international human rights law, which is often what people will do after they do their law degree. But again, like I said, I switched it up and did it this way. And then now I'm currently in an LOB honors status in York, England at the University of York, and doing my kind of normal law degree, let's put it that way. So I've specialized, and then once I'm done this degree, I'll be able to come back to Canada and hopefully transfer my law degree and then be an international lawyer, as well as be able to practice whatever province I decide to find myself in. So I feel like that's all that I will kind of bring to you right now, but yeah, it's where I'll
Thank
leave
you
it.
for that. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Katie. And you hit on so many part that I'm sure folks who are considering law school will probably want to dig into and ask you a little bit more. And as I said, I have questions that were submitted. I have questions of my own, but I don't want to hog the time. I want to make sure that folks who have dialed in have ample opportunity to ask their questions. But I am going to start off with one that I am going to ask all three of you. And I think it sort of came from probably more so, it was Katie who specifically referenced the small school. And I'm going to ask from each of your perspectives, did you have any sort of part along the way where attending a small school for your undergrad was prohibitive? Go ahead, Christine.
No. I mean, felt lucky to go out of town at all. I lived in Dartmouth, and my mother had to talk my dad into it because all the universities in Halifax, and I was 16. I forgot to tell you, I started in home economics. I was in home ec for 2 years. Same thing as Katie. I ran up against Chem 250 organic chemistry and thought, I think I need a new path. So I switched to English, which I loved after that. But no, in fact, Katie and I have talked about this quite a bit. The small school, it's like the small liberal arts college, they call them in the States. It offered many advantages that huge schools do not.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree
ahead,
with that.
Payton.
Absolutely. Being at Acadia, I had the opportunity to be involved in so much more than just my classes, right? Like as we all know, the opportunities you're presented as a student at Acadia, there's just so much you can get involved in. And so I became a very well-rounded individual. And I think that really served me well when I was ready to step into the next chapter. And also I had incredible relationships with all of my professors, as anyone in here who's currently at Acadia and understands and knows. And those people were my advocates. They supported me. They wrote me reference letters for law school. And you might not get that at a big school when you're in a classroom of 400 or 500 students. So I was very fortunate to have those people in my corner, and many of them are still in my corner, like 10 years later. So absolutely, it was definitely a great thing. There was no holdback to going to a small school.
I almost feel guilty the way I asked it. Was it at all prohibitive? I should have flipped it around and said, that come at it from the positive way. I think I just knew that it was probably going to be all positive. So I was trying to open that opportunity for something other than that. Katie, what about you?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think having a small, kind of smaller classroom setting and just a university in general was definitely beneficial. And since then, that has been one of those things I look for when I'm choosing new institutions for my various other degrees. The smaller class size really, as Payton said, enabled me to develop close friendships, but as well relationships with professors, colleagues, other people within the department that I would have probably not come across in classes, but in external kind of committees or events. So I've always kind of advocated for smaller class sizes for just getting an education that enables you to feel like not just a number, but a real person, and that enables you to be able to advocate for yourself more when you have built those kind of relations with the people around you and they know you as a human, not just a number. So yeah, no, there's been never negative side of me thinking that Acadia was too small for my undergraduate degree.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that, obviously, as a 25-year employee of the university and two-time graduate. I mean, obviously, I think it's 100% wonderful in all regards. But I just know that a lot of times when undergrads, people who have just graduated are pursuing masters or programs in whatever sort of regard, that a lot of times it's sort of like, well, did you go to U of T or did you go to, that kind of thing. So I'm really glad to hear that we're 3 for 3 folks, anyone listening online, in terms of that small school experience. And it was a great segue into a question that was submitted today. And it says, besides grades, what else do firms look for? So I'm going to ask all 3 of you that. I mean, Payton, you spoke about the SMILE program, but yeah, I think you were talking about in terms of sort of how it shaped you as a person. But outside of grades, what else sort of, is good experience, but also, frankly, good for an application for firms and what they consider when they're interviewing and taking you out to get to know you and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say if you're at Acadia, you're already doing the right things. You go to Acadia and you're having this very well-rounded experience, and that mindset proves to be really beneficial as you go through that next stage and you finish law school and you're going through the recruitment process. Being a well-rounded individual is what firms want to see. Of course, grades are important, but once your foot is in the door, they're no longer important. They want to see that you are a team player and you're involved and you're a person outside of just school. So I would say while you're looking at it, while you're in undergrad or thinking about pursuing law school, that's like kind of the big message I would say is keep yourself well-rounded, get involved in those extracurriculars, because those are the skills that will provide a really strong foundation when you are ready to go through that recruitment process after school.
Katie, did your experience, the fact that you're an incredibly accomplished musician, come into play at all when you were being selected for any of your numerous appointments or schooling?
I'm not quite sure. It might have. I've definitely included that in my various applications. I try not to put too much emphasis on that, given that, I'm trying to emphasize, other areas of my kind of well-rounded personality and interests. But yeah, I think definitely my music, just all my music, can certainly look appealing as not just being focused only on law and politics and the academic side of things, having that kind of passion. I believe employers and just other academic institutions do like to see a candidate who is passionate about things besides just, their academics. So I think piggybacking off of Payton's response, I also agreed that being just a well-rounded individual, getting involved in whatever you can is always beneficial. But I'd also say on the flip side, not spreading yourself too thin too, because if you spread yourself a little too thin, sometimes, the things that you are putting time into may not be as intentional, and so you want to make sure that employers and other institutions are seeing that you are well-rounded and you have involved yourself extensively in various areas, but also that you have kind of a couple or just one like major kind of passion that is, that you've committed and shown dedication towards and resilience within, because within that, I'm sure you will have experienced ups and downs within that side of your life as well. So I think that might be also another thing to keep in mind when applying for things.
Absolutely. Again, so many more questions. I have like a list of them now, and there's one in the chat, so I better get on with it. Christine, you mentioned being 16 when you started your undergrad. Can I ask you a little bit more about when you finished your undergrad? Was it a 3-year at that point in time, a 3-year bachelor's degree? Okay.
No, it was 4.
Okay, so you finished your undergrad at 20.
Yeah. Can I go back a little bit though? Marks are a funny thing. And I should tell you, I have hired many students, many young lawyers. So I have some background in that. Marks are, some people put way too much emphasis on them. And going back to the LSATs for a minute, Katie had stellar marks. Didn't matter. If your learning style doesn't fit the Yale set, your marks don't matter a darn. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to take into account when you're an interviewer. But I never put much emphasis on it. I like the idea, and I think I followed this in my interviewing, and that you want people to be passionate about something. And I really didn't care what it was. Like, could have been chess. I didn't care. But if you have somebody who is really able to focus on a subject, whether it be music or travel or whatever it is, that's a privileged thing. That does tell you something about what kind of lawyer they're going to be. And I was looking for people who would be interesting to be around. I wanted people who weren't just like focused and their parents had sent them to volunteers. Like I wasn't interested in that at all. That's your parents have money. And there are lots of people whose parents don't have money who make great lawyers. So there's so many things to be thinking about when you're hiring young lawyers. But that passion thing was top of mind for me. And I forgot what you asked me to actually talk to you about. Right.
No, Christine, and I'm so glad you chimed in, because I'm now thinking that, potential lawyers who are listening online, and even me knowing some recent grads who are thinking about law school and that type of thing, I'm sure so many are hoping that they find somebody like you who's doing the hiring, because you're preaching to the choir with what you've just said, sort of not being solely marks based. And I hope that inspires people who are listening, and people who listen to the recording later on. What I asked you about was just starting so young was really the question that I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
Right. Well, you could go after grade 11, and you may still be able to do this in Nova Scotia, to university. And I'm the eldest of 6 children. My mother thought maybe it was time for me to have a childhood because I was her helper, right? So she was the motivator I never thought about going to university after grade 11. I was 15. You don't think about stuff like that. And it was too young. I mean, I've said this to Katie many times. It was too young. But it was what it was. And, I enjoyed it maybe a little too much, and got over it, right? But because I was young, I didn't know what university was all about. There were no guidance counselors or anything to tell you what you should be thinking about clubs. Like, I didn't think about any of that. I never had a date when I went to university. Like, that's what I was thinking. It was a different world. It was a really different world. And I'm sorry, that's my work companion. You should probably mute me, or I should, because she's barking. Right.
Quite okay. A welcome distraction. Yeah. So let me get to one of the questions in the chat. But Katie, I did see you put your hand up at one point. Do you want me to come back to you? Yeah.
Yeah, just a really brief comment. Going off of what my mom said about just as an employer or someone considering hiring a lawyer, the director of the law school at the University of Edinburgh, I'm now good friends with her now. She said, funny enough, after they've checked off all the right categories of what they were looking for as a person that they're going to hire, she said if it came down to 2 people, it was, which one would I want to grab a beer with? So that was just similar to what my mom said. It comes down to, what are you going to be an interesting person to sit down with, even in a casual setting, and be able to just have an interesting conversation. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
And that rings true to me just recently, as I was sort of chatting with my niece as she was going through selection processes for her summer placements, and she was what I called wined and dined, and I'm like, this sounds like a great job interview, like, what's going on? But that's exactly what they were doing, right? I mean, obviously I wasn't there, I was just hearing it secondhand, but it sounded exactly like that, Katie, that it was sort of a situation of getting to know people outside of the book, outside of the office, outside of the task at hand, right? So the question in the chat, we have two now. One is, please guide me on how to pursue immigration law after graduation. So any sort of recommendations or suggestions on specifically immigration law?
Yeah, that was actually an area of law I was initially interested in potentially practicing down the line. So I did have my eyes set on that even when I started all of the other legal kind of degrees I've done that wasn't specifically law school. But I think all I've kind of realized is that there isn't much of a direct route to immigration law. You have to definitely take immigration related courses. So, I took EU immigration law. I've taken, asylum and refugee law. I've taken, various different related laws. And I mean, once you have those under your belt, first you'll figure out if you like that area of law in the first place, because you might be thinking right now that that's the area you want to go into, and then realize that you love it, or realize that actually it's not quite what I was expecting it to be. And that actually ended up being what I came to, is that I've taken all these law courses related to that, and that wasn't going to be the area that I was going to, find myself practicing within down the line. So after that, though, I do know that once if you do end up liking immigration law, you'll definitely be trying to find either firms or it could be even NGOs that hire in-house lawyers that work within immigration, And so there doesn't need to be a traditional route of being only law firm, has to be immigration law firm. That's it. It can be in various different ways. Like I said, as like an NGO or something else that requires a lawyer in-house that could be specializing within immigration specifically.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. Anything to add, Payton or Christine?
I don't know what it is in Halifax, and I'm sure it's probably not quite the same, but in Toronto there are within the Bar Association, there's a section that's an immigration section. Mm-hmm. And there must be, I'm not sure if there'd be a large immigration practice in Halifax or not. There might be, because it's a port. But that's what I would reach out to, is the Barrister Society, and say, is there anybody any group that practices immigration law, and they might have a website, they might have a newsletter, something like that.
Sure. I see lots of nods from you, Payton.
Yeah, Christine had a great suggestion. There's an association across Canada called the Canadian Bar Association. And I'm sure this is what Christine might be alluding to too, but they do have sections. There is an immigration section in Nova Scotia, and it's a great resource. But much to what Katie said, just taking those courses, I took immigration law in law school too, because I kind of wanted to see what it was all about. So really taking those courses, seeing if you like it, because you never really know. Like my path, you never really know if that's actually, and Katie's path, something you're going to want to do. So keeping your options open, but making sure you take those courses to really kind of get a sense if it's going to be for you is really important.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question in the comments section, and I'm assuming that this is a course, but let me just get to the question. It says, some tips to perform well in BA Law and Society. So is there a law and society course in an undergrad in a Bachelor of Arts, perhaps is what Akil is asking about? Payton or Katie, I'd look to you two probably.
Yeah, that program just kind of started within the past year, I believe. When I was there, it was only politics department that then provided a few law courses for students to take, but there was never a law and society degree or like a section of it. So I can't really speak too much on that, but I definitely say, like, as I have become very familiar with all of the politics department professors, they're all very friendly, and you can just, knock on their door during office hours and, just spark a conversation. And then, within that kind of, you'll maybe gauge some, tips, or even just like general comments about, what they might be expecting. And I mean, yeah, just use the resources you have available in the department, being the professors or even your higher upper year students who are in the department. And I'm sure they would be able to kind of guide you in the specific questions you're looking to have answered.
Sure. Great advice. And that's where I was going to take it as well, is just, regardless of the course, how to do well course is exactly those recommendations, Katie, for sure. And back to that small university conversation that we were having, it's much easier to be able to approach a prof during office hours or even on the street or in the BAC or, sort of just have those conversations. And they may just be, hi, how are you? Or how's your coffee this morning? But it can certainly lead into, getting to know your professor better and the professor getting to know you better, which is always a good thing, I think, regardless of what course you're taking. So I have a very specific one here now, and it's, if I am a BA Psych major, what minors should I be considering if I want to go into law? So I think if you want to think outside of knowing what our course list looks like, maybe not specific courses, but perhaps recommendations on content that have helped you along the way, or, was it a second language? Was it a sociology course? Was it, sort of just completely getting away from some law school prep and doing something fun, like maybe a music course? Just any recommendations from either of you on that one?
Yeah, that's a tough question. But again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. Like, keep yourself well-rounded. But honestly, like my experience at Acadia, Oonagh was my physical active living professor once upon a time. So doing courses that you enjoy and that you're passionate about and you can discover new things, I think that's almost more beneficial sometimes than trying to really build up your resume or build up a law school application. I took guitar last in the School of Music. I am not musical. But all of those things really contributed, and it made me really enjoy school and allowing that outlet in classes that may not have been quite as intensive as some of the other ones I was taking. No offense, Oonagh, physical active living, great course. Not quite as intense as some of the others. I think it just really allowed me to focus in on the really intense courses. It was a good break from that. So I don't think there is a right answer. If there's something that really you're feeling passionate about, if it is a second language, then do that, absolutely. But I don't think there is a right answer in terms of the courses you take. I know people who have gone both paths, both of which have been successful. So yeah, I think just doing something you're passionate about.
I agree. I mean, I've seen so many resumes that were just in a straight line. Oh, well, then I'm taking commerce here, and I think this will be good for a law school or admission or afterwards for work. I just find those boring. I mean, what you want is you want to see this person, not a crafted resume for law school. There've got to be other people like me who just kind of, your eyes glaze over when people have only done one thing.
And anecdotally, one thing to add with that is the courses that you might take as just trying something new might be the most, for me, for instance, social entrepreneurship was a class offered through the business school that I really didn't know much about, just took it out of, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. And through that was in that course that we developed the food cupboard at Acadia, which is still running all these years later. And that was one of the most impactful, beneficial experiences of my undergrad. And that happened through a course that didn't know much about, signed up, got placed with my group mates, and that's where it came. So anyways, just to say that you never know the outcome of jumping into some of these classes that you might not know much about. Sometimes those are, and that I got asked about that on my resume, on my law school application. That's something that I still is in my bio. So, those are the things that that can kind of cause those foundational aspects.
Absolutely. You never know when it's going to create that passion, or absolutely. Those roads not typically taken. And just taking one's courses that are interesting to you, that you're passionate about, will yield you good marks, and then the good marks factor into that whole mark conversation, right? And no offense taken, Payton, if you remember on the very first day, I did ask how many people are taking this course because it's an easy A. So just call it what it is. We had fun doing it, and we learned some things along the way. So there you go, right? Yeah, absolutely. So next one is how important is it to attend the top 5 law universities? And do you think the reputation of the university affects your career opportunities? I love it, Katie. I was wondering if you were going to weigh in here. Go ahead.
Yes. Oh man, yeah. I wouldn't say that going to the top 5 or university, specifically law universities in Canada, is necessary. I mean, I'm sure there are other people who will be like, yeah, that's the only way you're going to be able to get a really good job at a law firm. But in my perspective, like clearly I went to Acadia, I went to Edinburgh, I'm in now York, out of all places in England, to go do my law degree. Some of them have very good reputations around the world, and some are just kind of locally known. And so I had the opportunity for this last degree that I'm doing to go to like Oxford or Cambridge, some of the most well, regarded schools in the world. But I chose the University of York. One, because has this small school kind of vibe that we had at Acadia. Second, they have a different approach to teaching law. Their problem-based learning is their approach to teaching. They don't teach law in the most traditional way, because they realize that is kind of becoming kind of stale. And a lot of the students that come out of those law schools that teach only within the normal traditional way are not being able to actually apply the law that they're learning in their 3 years at school to actually their job. And so even though York is not necessarily known as the best school ever, I chose it over Cambridge and Oxford because one of my professors, who literally taught at both of those universities and at Harvard and at Yale law schools, had advised me to actually choose York because of the way that they teach law in their very, kind of hands-on problem-based learning. So I don't think it will impact too much on whether or not you will get a job. Like if you go to a university that's not really well known or one that is well known, it's all about what you put into it, because if you don't put anything into something that is like a big well-known school, that's not going to be enough to attract employers to you as a new employee at their firm or wherever else. So that's my 2 cents, but I'm happy to be corrected.
And no, there's no absolutely correction or non-correction. It's sort of that perspective of that problem-based learning and that experiential education, which is probably incredibly good for a lot of people who are non-traditional learners, and sort of providing that opportunity for law school as an option as a non-traditional learner, right? Like when my niece told me she was going to law school, I just pictured her at a table in a library with just stacks of books and going, how are you going to get through those? So that hands-on learning, absolutely. Christine or Payton? Yeah, please, Christine.
Oh, yes, I have a perspective. It doesn't, first of all, says who are the best universities. I have been to one that touts itself as the best, and I did a year of law school at Dalhousie and 2 at U of T. I graduated from U of T. I regretted for years doing that transfer, because U of T still, I know because I'm still involved as an alumni, teaches in a way that is lecture based, and the whole idea is to provide people who will work hard for downtown law firms. Like that's an oversimplification for sure, but as a hirer of, and I know many others who are hirers of young lawyers, you don't look at the university. You might, if it was a university you'd never heard of, that's for sure. But if it's in any one of the provinces of Ontario, not Ontario, of Canada, you've got a good legal education. We have a good education system. You can't pick it off. Oh yeah, they went to law school. Then what else did they do? So I don't think it's the be all and the end all for sure.
I was just looking to see if you were going to weigh in, Payton, I think, but it sounds like we've probably covered off.
Absolutely. They've covered it. All good.
Sure. Here's one. When you first started out as a lawyer, what did your work days look like?
I mean, I'm still starting out as a lawyer. I feel like I'm 3 years in and I feel like it could be my first day yesterday. So I feel like the beautiful thing about law, and you've heard from Christine, you've heard from Katie, there's so many different experiences and so many different pathways within the profession. So what is it? There's no such thing as a typical day. So for instance, because I am much more transactional, I don't go to court. I'm working on transactions, which means for me, purchase and sales of property. My every day is a little bit different, but sometimes I'm reviewing a deed of property from the 1800s. And then that afternoon, I'm drafting mortgage documents and speaking with borrowers for loans on behalf of a lender. So my role is very much an office-based job. I am in the office all day, every day, but I know that's not the experience of some of my colleagues who I graduated law school with. So everyone's going to have their day-to-day is going to look a little bit different. But starting out, I'd say my days look very similar to what they did when I first started out. While the work has changed a little bit and it's evolved, I knew going in that I was going into a more traditional 9 to 5 office job. Not to say that's what all legal careers look like.
I would say that you certainly light up when you talk about it. So there's a good start on what your days look like. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
Well, mine was so long ago when I was a young lawyer, but it wasn't anything like that, that's for sure. The days were very long. All of us were in by 8, and 7:30 was an early day. It was the beginnings of dockets, and like there were many. It was a different era for sure. I don't think there were any areas of law where you would be out by 5, and it was particularly hard for young women because that's your childbearing years, right? And in those days, there was no maternity leave, nothing like that. And it was kind of career limiting to have more than one. So, there were many things that were different. But I have been involved in a number of studies about why women leave the practice of law over the years. And it's not to have babies. It's because it's the balance, and I don't mean work-life balance, but the balance between FaceTime in the office. Now this may be changing, but and wanting to be home because your children are coming home, or even you want to go and play basketball. Like, it doesn't matter what. There was no balance at all, and I don't sense that had in downtown Toronto. That hasn't changed much.
So you brought us back around to where I said I wanted to come back to, and because we are running out of time. So I do want to pose this question, and it was certainly not it was not purposeful to have 3 female presenting lawyers on the call today. But here we are, and I think it's it's a wonderful opportunity to, if nothing else, let folks on the call know that it is absolutely a profession for anyone who wants to pursue it. But I would like to ask the question, and I'm not sure how to word it properly, so that we can sort of generate some discussion about what the 3 of you, in your experiences so far, and where you are now, what types of things you think do look different from when you first started, Christine, to when you started 3 years ago, Payton, to where you are, Katie. Like, do you see an evolution? Is it very different? Just looking for personal experiences, I guess, to maybe answer that question.
Yeah, I can probably start. And, I've spent a lot of time talking with my partners at my firm and colleagues who have maybe graduated around when Christine graduated. And I know that I am not naive, that it was a very difficult experience for female lawyers at the time. It has gotten better. Would I say we're there? We've hit the mark? We have not. There's still things that happen in the firm. Are they outward hostilities? Maybe not quite as much anymore. But there are micro things that you do have to overcome. And I'm not, I never want to put rose-colored glasses on and tell people that it's completely great. There's still things we deal with. There's still, you can see sometimes work go to your male colleagues because they're on the golf course with the partners in the firm, and they have those personal connections. They play Wednesday night hockey together. So they talk about a file on Wednesday nights, and then all of a sudden they're getting more work than you are. So while there's not, like I said, there's microaggressions still, you still have to work a little bit harder, and it's acknowledged, even though I believe the law school split now is more women are going to law school than men. I think it's like almost 60-40. You still don't see gender parity in partnerships at law firms because women still are leaving private practice. It's not like that in every legal career, but it's definitely like that in private practice. So it still exists. We're getting better, but we all still have some work to do.
Thank you, Payton.
I am not working in a law firm right now, to be quite frank, so I can't speak too much about that experience, but I can kind of briefly touch on being a woman, but also diverse individual, let's put it that way. Fortunately, in my education, there has been so many people from all around the world present within my classes, mainly actually women, like Payton just said. There's a lot more women choosing to try to go into the legal field. So it is nice to see all different kinds of faces in my classes at my universities, specifically women. I will say, yeah, there are still microaggressions, specifically racist ones, that happen frequently. I can't necessarily speak too much about what it's like to be, be a candidate for a law firm yet. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out for me personally, if that's going to impede on my opportunities being, a visibly diverse individual as well as being a woman. So hopefully not. I hope that that won't be the case, but as Payton has said, it's better. It's getting better for sure, but I don't think we are there yet either, from what I've heard from various friends who are, through law school in Canada, as well as in, practicing law in, around Canada as well. So that's all I'll say on that too.
Thank you for sharing, Katie.
I
Christine?
guess you might want me to have some input here. For years and years, 25 years, people will tell you, oh, well, it's half women in the law schools. That's not the statistic you want to know. What you want to know is how many partners are there in downtown law firms that are, what's the split? And it's nowhere near half, nowhere near still today. In fact, the Globe and Mail did a huge kind of in-depth piece on it about 6 months ago, and it's still abysmal. And some of that is women are voting with their feet and leaving, not to have children. We do that too, because we're very competent, right? But it often to start their own businesses or to start their own law firms or to do many different things. Because the culture of some law firms, I won't say all, but is just antithetical to normal family life. And I'm not talking 9 to 5. I don't know anybody who works 9 to 5. After the kids go to bed, you go back to work, right? That's not the problem. It's the golf thing. It's the when in my day we weren't allowed to travel with, if I was a litigator. Your senior has a case in Windsor or London or something. You can't travel overnight because his wife will be upset. Excuse me. That fortunately we don't have that anymore, and we do have maternity leave, and we have lots of things have gotten better, lots and lots of things, but the culture has not changed enough for sure, and it hasn't changed in many ways. And the business getting the rainmaking, that's a huge part of it, because we as humans, we tend to collect with people who are like us, and we aren't like any of those guys. Like that's just the way it is. So women have been taking this on in various firms. There will be kind of they don't call them this, but rainmaking collectives within firms that are big enough to have more than one partner, and trying to address the problems. It's not really the clients, it's the lawyers in the firm. So that's my 2 cents worth for today.
Thank you for sharing, Christine. And so what I'm going to do is we're at the end of our time. Not surprising, it happened very quickly. What I'm going to ask each of you is we'll switch gears from some of the questions that we've been asking in terms of schooling and switch gears to sort of recent grads who may be already in law school and listening today and or listening to the recording later. And what would you say to somebody who says the going is getting just too tough right now? I don't think I can do it. So what would your rally cry be for that person?
I can kick it off if you'd like. I would say to find your why. I mean, one thing I did when I was in my first year of law school is I wrote myself a letter, and I wrote on the front to open when you're not sure if you can keep going. I still haven't opened it. It's sitting in my drawer. But I would say that as soon as I lose track of the why, I'm going to open that letter, and I know I'm going to bring myself back to where I was in first year. So it is not an easy career. I don't want to make anyone under the impression that it is. It's not. It's a lot of work. It's a hard job. But if you can keep that why in mind, if you can find what really drives you, what is your passion, then the days aren't so bad, and you can really find joy and find fulfillment in it.
Payton, I got goosebumps as you told me that. So it worked for me.
Yeah.
Katie or Christine?
Yeah, obviously, all students, they definitely have gone through those moments where you're like, I just want to give up right now. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to drop out and that'll be it. We always say it as a joke, out of humor, but we do feel that, but in those moments, like Payton really beautifully said, like, find your why, and like if you find the things that within the challenge that you're going through, if it's a specific assignment or a specific paper you're writing, like just specifically a paper that you're writing that you're finding difficult, try to find like the smallest thing within that paper or whatever task you're trying to get through. Find something that at least gives you some interest. Like, it doesn't need to be a biggest thing. The entire paper might be boring, but maybe find one little thing in there that at least sparks some kind of motivation and drive, because like it'll get done. The project, the paper, whatever, it always ends up getting done. Even if it's right at the last minute when you need to press submit, it'll get done. It's a matter of, trying to remind yourself, drink water, honestly, take a nap. It's okay to take a break if you need to come back to what you're doing with fresher eyes. Like, a lot of people just kind of, will push and just start hitting a wall, but they forget just the basic things of being a human. Go and have a coffee with a friend. That might give you life again a little bit to get back to what you're doing, so trying to find that little bit of balance or spark within your day to like push you to realize that like it's all going to be worth it at the end, but it is definitely going to be a challenge, but you'll get through it. So that's all I will say for that.
Love it. And what I heard mostly in that one, Katie, is remember that you are a human.
Yes.
Remember yourself. Remember your person. Christine.
The others have said that so well. I can't add anything to that, but I do feel that particularly me has focused too much on the law firm experience. Law, it's incredible. Law is about people. How do we relate to one another? What are the barriers that we set up that we don't want to go past or out? I used to call it the playpen in mediators when I was in mediation. That's the playpen. We don't talk about in daily life. We don't talk about laws unless we bump up against the playpen rails. But there's so many interesting things to do in law. And Katie and I have talked about this at length. Policy work, government policy work, NGO work, not-for-profit, so many things. It is a foundation for almost any career. And I say that to young women, particularly when they say, well, what if I get there and, it's too discouraging? I say, like, it's a great credential. Like, you can take it anywhere, and it stretches your mind. It gives you a very disciplined way of analyzing facts. And it also teaches you, most of us anyway, how to marshal an argument, how to advocate for something. There are many wonderful things about a law degree and a legal. I mean, look at me and all the things I've done. But what I focused a bit on the negativity, and there is negativity for sure. But when I was in government, I didn't run across any of that stuff. It was wonderful. It was mind expanding. You know, this is a way to change the world. So go for it.
Great inspiration. Thank you, Christine. And thank you, all three of you, for your time this evening. Really appreciate you carving this hour out with us in the prep time as well, to share your experiences, your motivation, just to sort of give us a little bit of an insight into the careers that you have had and the age and stage that you're at now. So we really appreciate it, and obviously love the fact that the common denominator is that you all graduated from Acadia. So it makes my job super easy to do when we have so many wonderful people in the alumni community who are willing to share their time and their talent with us. So thank you very much. Folks on the line, thank you for joining us. I didn't get through all of the questions, again, not surprisingly, but hopefully you've been able to mine some good stuff from this conversation for your path moving forward. The good news is we will put your names into a draw to send out something to those of you who attended as audience members, and the panelists, of course, will have a wee thank you in the mail to you as well. So coming up next for us, for anyone who's paying attention to our event website and the event platform, is Homecoming, is a big one. So check out the events page, check out the virtual event listing, and always remember that Acadia is your home to come back to at any point in time during the year, but especially during Homecoming.